The primitive species. Commander Zethkar stood on the bridge of his flagship, staring at the blue-green world rotating slowly before them. His 6 arms moved across the control panels with practiced ease, while his 3 eyes focused on the data streams flowing across the holographic displays. The planet looked peaceful, almost beautiful in its simplicity. "Analysis complete, Commander," reported his tactical officer, a slender Vorthon with crystalline skin that shimmered in the ship's artificial light. "The inhabitants call themselves humans. They appear to be a remarkably primitive species." Zethkar's mandibles clicked in amusement. In his 300 years of conquest across the galaxy, he had encountered countless civilizations. Most surrendered within days once they witnessed the might of the Galactic Dominion. Those that didn't were quickly reduced to ash and memory. "Define primitive," Zethkar commanded, though he suspected he already knew the answer. The tactical officer's fingers danced across her console. "They still use chemical propulsion for space travel. Their fastest vessels take months to reach their own moon. They fight among themselves constantly over resources and territory. Most shocking of all, they still use projectile weapons that fire solid metal bullets." A chorus of laughter rippled through the bridge crew. The Mechtan warriors, with their metallic exoskeletons, found this particularly amusing. Their own weapons could disintegrate matter at the molecular level. The idea of throwing pieces of metal at enemies seemed absurdly outdated. "Their largest cities hold only a few million inhabitants," the officer continued. "They've barely begun to terraform their neighboring planets. By our standards, they're still in the early stages of planetary civilization." Zethkar nodded thoughtfully. The Galactic Dominion had strict protocols for dealing with primitive species. Usually they offered a choice: submit to Dominion rule and become a vassal species, or face complete annihilation. Most chose submission once they saw a demonstration of Dominion firepower. "What about their military capabilities?" asked Sub-Commander Raylock, a hulking creature whose species had evolved from predatory hunters. His scarred hide told the story of countless battles across the galaxy. "Laughably weak," the tactical officer replied. "Their most powerful weapons are fusion devices, but they're crude and inefficient. They have no energy shields, no plasma cannons, no quantum disruptors. Their space-based defenses consist of a few hundred satellites armed with conventional missiles." Zethkar studied the planet more closely. Earth, they called it. Such a simple name for what would soon become another jewel in the Dominion's crown. The planet's resources were substantial. Vast oceans perfect for aquatic species, diverse climates suitable for colonization, and rich mineral deposits that would fuel the Dominion's expansion for centuries. "There's something else, Commander," the tactical officer added, her voice taking on a puzzled tone. "They seem to have an unusual level of genetic and cultural diversity for such a primitive species. Our scans show thousands of different languages, belief systems, and social structures." "Typical of pre-unification civilizations," Zethkar dismissed with a wave of his primary arm. "They haven't learned to think beyond their tribal boundaries. This actually works in our favor. Divided species are easier to conquer." The bridge's communication array suddenly chirped with an incoming transmission. The view screen flickered to life, showing a middle-aged human male in what appeared to be a formal uniform. He had graying hair and tired eyes, but maintained a dignified posture despite clearly being overwhelmed by the situation. "This is Secretary General Harrison of the United Nations," the human began, his voice carrying across the bridge's translation systems. "We've detected your vessels in our solar system. We come in peace and hope to establish diplomatic relations." More laughter echoed through the bridge. The concept of a primitive species attempting diplomacy with the Dominion was always entertaining. Zethkar activated his own communication array. "I am Commander Zethkar of the Galactic Dominion First Fleet. Your world has been selected for incorporation into our empire. You have one of your planetary rotations to consider our terms." "Terms?" Harrison asked, his face showing confusion and growing concern. "Complete surrender of all governmental and military authority to the Dominion. All humans will be relocated to designated settlements where you will serve as a labor force for our colonization efforts. In exchange, your species will be allowed to continue existing under our protection." The color drained from Harrison's face. "I will need time to discuss this with our world leaders. This is a decision that affects all of humanity." "You have 24 of your hours," Zethkar stated coldly. "Refuse, and your species will be classified as hostile. The consequences will be severe." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in satisfied silence. Zethkar had delivered this same ultimatum to dozens of species over the centuries. The pattern was always the same: initial shock, desperate attempts at negotiation, and finally, inevitable surrender. "Shall I prepare the standard occupation protocols?" Subcommander Rylock asked. "Yes, but keep our ground forces in reserve. I doubt these humans will put up much resistance. Their primitive weapons won't even scratch our shields." As the hours passed, Zethkar watched Earth's communication networks light up with frantic activity. Their leaders were holding emergency meetings, their news broadcasts filled with panic and confusion. Some humans were praying to their various deities, others were rioting in the streets. It was the typical chaos that preceded surrender. But something felt different about these humans. Their military forces, instead of standing down, were mobilizing. Soldiers were moving to defensive positions, pilots were scrambling to their aircraft, and their few space-based assets were being repositioned. Most puzzling of all, their civilian population was displaying an unexpected level of organization. Instead of pure panic, Zethkar observed communities coming together, sharing resources, and preparing for an extended conflict. "Commander," the tactical officer called out, "we're receiving another transmission from Earth." Secretary General Harrison appeared on screen again, but his demeanor had changed completely. The fear was gone, replaced by a steely determination that reminded Zethkar uncomfortably of hardened warriors he'd faced in previous campaigns. "Commander Zethkar," Harrison began, "I've consulted with the leaders of every nation on Earth. Our answer is unanimous." He paused, meeting Zethkar's gaze directly through the screen. "We refuse your terms. Earth is not for sale, and humanity will not bow to any empire." Zethkar's mandibles clicked in annoyance. This was unexpected but not unprecedented. Some species chose the hard way. It would just mean more work for his fleet. "Your answer is noted," Zethkar replied. "Prepare your world for the consequences of your foolish decision." As the transmission ended, he turned to his crew. "Signal the fleet. Begin the demonstration phase. Target their largest military installations with precision strikes. Once they see what our weapons can do, they'll reconsider their position." The Dominion's strategy was well tested. A few devastating attacks on military targets usually convinced primitive species that resistance was futile. The humans would see their most advanced weapons turn to slag in seconds, and their leaders would quickly call for surrender rather than watch their entire civilization burn. But as Zethkar gave the order to commence the attack, he noticed something in the tactical officer's expression that gave him pause. She was studying her sensor readings with a frown that suggested confusion rather than confidence. "Something troubling you?" he asked. "It's probably nothing, Commander," she replied hesitantly. "It's just that their military positioning seems odd for such a primitive species. Their formation suggests they're preparing for orbital bombardment, but how could they know our standard attack protocols?" Zethkar dismissed her concerns with a gesture. "Lucky guess, or perhaps they've studied our previous conquests. It won't matter. No primitive species has ever successfully resisted the Dominion." As his fleet moved into attack position, Zethkar felt the familiar satisfaction of another easy victory ahead. The humans would learn, as countless species before them had learned, that resistance to the galactic dominion was not just futile, it was impossible. The first phase of the demonstration was about to begin, and Earth would soon understand the true meaning of superior firepower. Or so Zethkar believed, as his ships began their descent toward the primitive blue world that dared to defy the galaxy's greatest empire. The first strike. The demonstration began at dawn over the Pacific. 3 Dominion destroyers descended through Earth's atmosphere like metallic meteors, their hull plating gleaming in the morning sunlight. Each vessel was the size of a city block, bristling with energy weapons that had reduced countless worlds to rubble. Zethkar watched from his flagship as the destroyers moved into position above the humans' largest military complex in North America. The plan was simple: vaporize the installation with a single coordinated strike, then broadcast the footage across Earth's communication networks. Once humanity saw their most advanced military base turn to glass in seconds, they would understand the futility of resistance. "All vessels report ready," announced Sub-Commander Ralok. "Target acquired and locked." "Fire!" Zethkar commanded. 3 brilliant beams of energy lanced down from the destroyers, striking the human military base with enough force to level a mountain. The weapons that had conquered star systems and brought mighty galactic empires to their knees unleashed their fury upon the primitive human installation. And something impossible happened. The beams struck a shimmering energy barrier that materialized around the base like a soap bubble made of light. For a moment, the unstoppable force met an immovable object, creating a light show that could be seen from orbit. Then, incredibly, the energy beams scattered harmlessly across the barrier's surface, dispersing into the atmosphere like water breaking against stone. The bridge fell silent. In 3 centuries of conquest, Zethkar had never seen primitive species technology withstand Dominion firepower. The tactical officer's 3 eyes were wide with disbelief as she frantically checked her instruments. "Commander," she stammered, "our weapons had no effect. The humans appear to have some form of energy shielding." "That's impossible," Zethkar growled, his 6 arms clenching into fists. "Run a full diagnostic on our weapon systems." "Systems are functioning normally, sir." "The problem isn't with our weapons." Before Zethkar could respond, the human base began to glow with a different kind of energy. Massive turrets emerged from concealed positions, rotating to track the Dominion destroyers hovering above. These weren't the primitive projectile weapons their intelligence had reported. These were sleek, advanced energy cannons that hummed with barely contained power. "Warning shots detected," the tactical officer reported, her voice rising in pitch. "Multiple targeting sensors are painting our destroyers." Secretary General Harrison's image appeared on the view screen without being summoned, apparently having hacked into their communication systems with disturbing ease. "Commander Zethkar," Harrison said calmly, "I believe there's been a misunderstanding. We tried to tell you we come in peace, but we never said we come defenseless." "How are you doing this?" Zethkar demanded. "Our intelligence indicates your species lacks advanced energy manipulation technology." Harrison smiled, and for the first time, Zethkar noticed something predatory in the human's expression. "Your intelligence is based on what we've chosen to show the galaxy. Did you really think a species capable of interstellar communication would advertise our defensive capabilities to potential invaders?" The truth hit Zethkar like a physical blow. The humans had been deliberately hiding their technological advancement. Their public face of primitive chemical rockets and projectile weapons was a facade, designed to make potential enemies underestimate them. "Impossible," he muttered. "We've observed your species for months. Our scouts confirmed your primitive status." "What your scouts observed," Harrison explained patiently, "were our civilian technologies and our intentionally outdated military displays. We learned long ago that in a galaxy full of predators, looking weak is often the best defense. Would you have brought only a single fleet if you'd known we could defend ourselves? Zethkar's mandibles clicked nervously as the implications sank in. The Dominion had deployed a standard conquest fleet, sized for intimidating and defeating primitive resistance. If the humans possessed advanced defensive technology, his current force might be insufficient. "Sir," the tactical officer interrupted urgently, "I'm detecting massive energy buildups across the planet's surface. They have installations we never detected during our initial scans." The main display showed Earth as Zethkar had never seen it before. Hidden beneath what appeared to be civilian cities, massive defensive complexes were powering up. Energy signatures that had been masked by clever engineering were suddenly visible as humans abandoned their deception. Mountain ranges split open to reveal orbital defense platforms. Seemingly innocent skyscrapers transformed as their outer shells retracted, exposing weapon systems that rivaled anything in the Dominion arsenal. The humans hadn't just been hiding a few defensive systems, they'd converted their entire planet into a fortress. "This is your final warning," Harrison continued. "Leave our system immediately, or we'll be forced to defend ourselves." Zethkar's pride wouldn't allow retreat. Not after being deceived by a supposedly primitive species. He'd conquered hundreds of worlds. A single planet, no matter how well defended, couldn't stand against the might of the First Fleet. "Open fire on all targets," he commanded. "Full bombardment pattern. I want every installation on that planet reduced to atoms." The response was immediate and devastating, but not in the way Zethkar had expected. The moment his ships began their attack, Earth's hidden defenses activated in perfect coordination. Energy beams more powerful than anything the humans should possess reached up from the planet's surface to strike his vessels. The destroyer closest to Earth's surface simply vanished, vaporized so completely that not even debris remained. The second destroyer's shields held for exactly 3 seconds before being overwhelmed, its hull cracking like an eggshell before exploding in a brilliant fireball. The third destroyer managed to retreat to a higher orbit, but not before taking severe damage that left it listing and powerless. "How?" Zethkar whispered, staring at the tactical display that showed 3/4 of his advance force destroyed in less than a minute. "Commander!" the tactical officer shouted. "Multiple objects launching from Earth's surface. Analyzing, sir. They're missiles, but unlike anything in our databases, they're moving at significant fractions of light speed." Zethkar watched in horror as dozens of human missiles streaked toward his fleet. These weren't the chemical rockets their intelligence had reported. They moved with impossible speed and precision, adjusting course to track evasive maneuvers that should have been beyond any targeting system. The first missile struck one of his heavy cruisers amidships. The explosion tore through the vessel's armor as if it were paper, secondary explosions rippling along its length before the entire ship broke apart. The second and third missiles found their targets with equal precision, and within minutes, Zethkar had lost half his fleet to weapons that weren't supposed to exist. "Sir?" Sub-Commander Raylock called out, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. "We need to retreat. We're taking losses faster than we can respond." But retreat was no longer a simple option. The human missiles had formed a defensive perimeter around Earth, creating a deadly obstacle course that his remaining ships would have to navigate. More missiles were launching every second, and each one seemed more advanced than the last. "Analysis complete on the human weapons," the tactical officer reported. "Sir, these aren't just advanced. They're using principles of physics we don't fully understand. Some of these missiles are bending space-time around themselves to achieve impossible acceleration." Zethkar felt a chill that had nothing to do with the bridge's climate control. In all his years of conquest, he'd never encountered a species that had surpassed Dominion technology. The humans weren't just more advanced than they'd appeared. They might be more advanced than the Dominion itself. "Commander." Harrison's voice came through the communication system again. "You've lost 7 ships and achieved nothing. I'm offering you one last chance to withdraw peacefully. Continue this attack, and I guarantee none of your vessels will survive the next 10 minutes. For the first time in his 300-year career, Commander Zeth-Kar faced the possibility of total defeat. The primitive species that was supposed to surrender after a simple demonstration had just destroyed most of his fleet with contemptuous ease, and they were still calling it a defensive action. The human solution pride and 3 centuries of unchallenged conquest clouded Zeth-Kar's judgment. Despite watching half his fleet disappear in minutes, he couldn't accept the reality that humans had outmaneuvered the mighty Dominion. There had to be another explanation. Perhaps they'd allied with another galactic power or discovered some ancient technology cache. "Signal the reserve fleet," he commanded through clenched mandibles. "Full deployment! Bring everything!" Sub-Commander Raylock's scarred face showed open alarm. "Sir, deploying the entire reserve fleet will leave 3 star systems undefended. Are you certain?" "Do it!" Zeth-Kar roared. "I will not be humiliated by primitives hiding behind borrowed technology." The tactical officer worked frantically at her console. "Reserve fleet acknowledging. Estimated arrival time, 6 hours. But sir, they're requesting confirmation of enemy strength. Fleet Admiral Corvin wants to know what could require our entire reserve." "Tell him we're facing unexpected resistance," Zeth-Kar muttered. He wasn't ready to admit that a single planet had neutralized most of the First Fleet. While they waited for reinforcements, the humans did something that puzzled Zeth-Kar even more than their advanced weapons. Instead of pressing their advantage or demanding surrender, they simply stopped fighting. Earth's defensive systems powered down to standby mode, and Secretary General Harrison requested another communication. "Commander, I can see you're calling for additional ships," Harrison said when the link established. His calm demeanor was more unsettling than any threats would have been. "Before you escalate this further, there's something you should understand about humanity." "What could you possibly tell me that would matter?" Zeth-Kar spat. "We know about the Galactic Dominion. We've known for decades. We've studied your tactics, your technology, your history of conquest. We know about the 47 species you've enslaved and the 12 civilizations you've completely destroyed." Zeth-Kar's 6 arms froze over his control panels. This was impossible. Earth was supposed to be an isolated world with no interstellar contacts beyond their primitive radio signals. Harrison continued, "What you don't know is that we've been in contact with several of your former territories. The Veltar refugees who escaped your purge 17 years ago, the underground resistance movement on Kepler Prime, the exiled government of the Andromedian Republic." "You're lying," Zeth-Kar said, but uncertainty crept into his voice. "The Veltar taught us energy shielding technology in exchange for sanctuary. The Kepler resistance shared their intelligence on Dominion fleet movements. The Andromedians helped us develop faster-than-light missile systems." Harrison leaned forward. "Commander, did you really think you could oppress dozens of species across the galaxy without some of them finding ways to fight back?" The implications hit Zeth-Kar like a cascade of falling dominoes. If the humans were telling the truth, Earth wasn't just one defended world. It was the center of an anti-Dominion alliance. The primitive species had been building a coalition of the conquered and displaced, sharing technology and intelligence. "That still doesn't explain how you hide your capabilities from our scouts," Zeth-Kar challenged, though his confidence was rapidly eroding. "Simple human psychology," Harrison replied with a slight smile. "We're exceptionally good at showing people what they want to see. Your scouts came expecting to find primitives, so we showed them exactly that. Fake military exercises with obsolete weapons. Staged broadcasts of our most advanced technology, carefully crafted public records that supported your assumptions. You deceived the entire Galactic Dominion? We learned from the best teachers, 47 conquered species who told us exactly how you operate. You always underestimate opposition that appears weak. You always deploy minimum necessary force. You never bother with detailed intelligence gathering on primitive worlds." Harrison's expression hardened. Your arrogance is your greatest weakness, Commander. The bridge's communication array suddenly crackled with multiple incoming transmissions. Zethkar's tactical officer looked up in confusion. Sir, we're receiving signals from the reserve fleet. They report coming under attack. By whom? Zethkar demanded. Unknown vessels, sir. The transmissions are garbled, but Admiral Corvin is reporting multiple ship losses before the signal cuts off. Harrison's image never flickered, suggesting the humans were monitoring all Dominion communications. Your reserve fleet is currently engaging forces from the Free Kepler Navy, supported by Veltar stealth ships and human long-range strike vessels. We've been tracking their movements since they left Dominion space. Zethkar stared at the human leader in growing horror. This wasn't a simple planetary defense. It was a coordinated multi-species assault on Dominion forces, planned and executed with military precision that suggested decades of preparation. How many ships do you have? He whispered. Does it matter? The question you should be asking is how many ships you have left. The bridge's tactical display updated with new information, and Zethkar's worst fears were confirmed. Of the reserve fleet's 23 vessels, only 8 were still reporting. The others had simply vanished from sensors, destroyed or disabled in what should have been empty space. This is impossible, Sub-Commander Raylock muttered. The Dominion has ruled this galaxy for 1,000 years. No coalition of primitives could challenge us. You're right, Harrison agreed. No coalition of primitives could challenge you, but we're not primitives anymore. We've spent 50 years building an alliance of free species, sharing technology, and preparing for this day. Every world you've conquered, every species you've enslaved, every civilization you've destroyed, they all have survivors, and they all want justice. New contacts appeared on Zethkar's sensors. Dozens of ships were decloaking around Earth, vessels of designs he didn't recognize but with energy signatures that matched Dominion military technology. More ships appeared near Jupiter, then Mars, then the outer planets. The entire human solar system was surrounded by a fleet that outnumbered his remaining forces 10-1. The Dominion's greatest strength has always been divide and conquer, Harrison continued. You attack isolated worlds that can't effectively coordinate their defense. But what happens when the conquered species unite? What happens when primitive humans provide a neutral meeting ground for refugees and rebels? What happens when 47 different civilizations pool their knowledge and resources? You get this. Harrison gestured to the tactical display showing the surrounded remnants of the First Fleet. You get the end of the Galactic Dominion. Zethkar felt the weight of history shifting around him. In trying to conquer one primitive world, he'd stumbled into a trap that had been generations in the making. Earth hadn't just defended itself. It had become the coordination center for a galactic revolution. What do you want? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. We want the Dominion to release every enslaved world. We want reparations for the destroyed civilizations. We want the war criminals who ordered genocides brought to justice. Harrison's expression softened slightly. But mostly, we want the galaxy to be free to develop without fear of conquest. The Dominion Council will never agree to these terms. The Dominion Council is currently dealing with simultaneous uprisings on 17 worlds and coordinated attacks on 3 major fleet bases. Your communication with Dominion High Command was cut off 20 minutes ago when rebel forces seized the primary relay station. Harrison leaned back in his chair. Commander, the Galactic Dominion ended the moment you opened fire on Earth. You just haven't realized it yet. The bridge fell silent except for the hum of life support systems. Zethkar looked at his remaining crew, seeing the same stunned realization in their faces. They'd come to conquer a primitive world and had instead triggered the collapse of their entire civilization. What happens to us? Sub-Commander Raylock asked quietly. That depends, Harrison replied. Surrender now, and you'll be treated as prisoners of war according to galactic conventions. Continue fighting, and you'll be destroyed. The choice is yours. Zethkar considered his options. He could order a final suicidal attack, knowing it would accomplish nothing but ensuring his crew's deaths. He could try to flee, though the human fleet had clearly demonstrated the ability to track and intercept Dominion vessels. Or he could accept that everything he'd believed about the galaxy's order had just crumbled around him. "I surrender," he said finally, the words tasting like ashes in his mouth. Harrison nodded respectfully. "Thank you, Commander. Your crew will be safe, and perhaps in time, you'll understand that freedom is worth more than empire." As human vessels moved to escort the surviving Dominion ships to designated areas, Zethkar couldn't help but wonder how many other primitive species across the galaxy were watching these events unfold. How many oppressed worlds were suddenly realizing that the mighty Dominion wasn't invincible after all. The humans had done more than defend their world. They'd shown the entire galaxy that tyrants could be defeated, that the conquered could become the liberators, and that sometimes the greatest strength came from unity rather than domination. In trying to add one more world to their empire, the Galactic Dominion had lost everything. And it had all started with underestimating a species they deemed primitive.